Hey everyone! Tonight we're stepping into a world of mountain cities built without mortar, of roads that cross the highest peaks on Earth, of an empire that had no writing and no wheel and no iron, and yet administered 12 million people across the length of the Andes with a precision that still astonishes modern engineers and administrators. We're talking about Inca Empire, Tawantinsuyu, the four quarters of the world, and it was far more sophisticated, more beautiful, and more human than most people realise. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. To understand the Inca Empire, you have to understand the Andes. The Andes mountain range runs the entire length of South America, 7,000 kilometers from Venezuela in the north to Tierra del Fuego in the south, and it is one of the most dramatic and varied landscapes on Earth. Within a horizontal distance of 100 kilometers, you can move from the Pacific coast, one of the driest deserts in the world, up through the foothills and the cloud forests to the high plateau, the Altiplano, at 4,000 meters, where the air is thin and the light is extraordinary, and the temperature drops below freezing on clear nights even in summer, and then down the eastern slopes into the Amazon basin, one of the wettest and most biodiverse environments on the planet. The Inca Empire governs all of this. The Altiplano, the high plateau centered on Lake Titicaca, the largest high-altitude lake in the world, is the heartland of Andean civilization. It is a landscape of particular beauty and particular harshness. The grass of the puna, the vast herds of llamas and alpacas that graze it, the enormous sky that at altitude is a deeper blue than anywhere else, the cold that makes every clear night feel like the edge of the universe. The peoples who have lived here for thousands of years before the Incas, the Tiwanaku civilization, the Wari Empire, have developed the agricultural techniques and the social organizations that the Incas will inherit and extend. The raised field agriculture of the lakeshore, camelones, the terracing of the slopes, Andeans, the freeze-drying of potatoes and meat that preserves food for years in the cold, dry air. All of these are pre-Inca innovations that the Incas systematize and spread across their empire. Our three companions tonight are Koya, a woman of the ayllu, the extended family community that is the basic unit of Andean social organization, living in a village in the Cusco Valley in the period of Inca expansion in the 15th century, whose daily life is shaped by the Mita labor system that the empire operates, and whose family's relationship to the state is one of mutual obligation that is more complex and more interesting than simple subjugation. There is Tupac, a quipucamayoc, a keeper of the Quipu, the knotted string recording system that serves as the Inca's administrative memory, who works in the provincial administration near Cusco, and whose knowledge of the empire's accounting system makes him one of the most important and least celebrated figures in Inca governance. And there is Cusi, a soldier in the Inca army during the Great Expansion under Pachacuti and his successors, a man from a newly conquered people on the northern frontier who's been incorporated into the imperial military system, and who serves the Sapa Inca with the pragmatic loyalty of someone who has weighed the alternatives and found them less appealing. The Inca begin as one of many ethnic groups competing for power in the Cusco Valley in the centuries before their great expansion. The traditional founding myth tells of Manco Capac and his sister wife Mama Oclo emerging from Lake Titicaca, sent by Inti the sun god to found a civilization at the place where a golden staff sinks into the fertile ground, and that place is Cusco, which becomes the capital and the navel of the world. The archaeological reality is less dramatic but still remarkable. The Inca are a people of the Cusco Valley, who build a regional power through alliances, marriages and military pressure in the 12th, 13th and 14th centuries, and who are then nearly destroyed by a coalition of neighbouring peoples, the Chanca Confederation, in the early 15th century. The defeat of the Chanca is the pivotal moment in Inca history, and the man who achieves it becomes the pivotal figure, Pachacuti Inca Yupanqui, who takes power around 1438 and rules until 1471, and who transforms the Inca from a regional Andean power into the largest empire in the pre-Columbian Americas. The name Pachacuti means world overturner in Quechua, a name that is chosen rather than given, the name of a man who understands what he has done. He is the Inca equivalent of Cyrus the Great or Genghis Khan, the individual whose genius creates the institutional and ideological framework within which his successors can expand, the founder not just of an empire but of the idea of empire. Pachacuti rebuilds Cusco from the ground up, laying it out in the shape of a puma, the sacred cat that symbolizes Inca power, with the great fortress of Sacsayhuaman forming the head and the confluence of two rivers forming the tail. The stones of Inca Cusco are cut with a precision that still defies easy explanation. Polygonal blocks fitted together without mortar, their joints so tight that a knife blade cannot be inserted between them, the whole structure designed to flex rather than crack during the earthquakes that periodically shake the Andes. The largest blocks weigh more than 100 tons. They are moved without wheeled vehicles. The wheel is not used in the Andes. Without iron tools, using only stone and bronze and the organised labour of thousands of workers operating under the mitre system. How this is achieved is a question that has not been entirely answered. The expansion under Pachacuti and his son Tupac Inca Yupanqui is astonishingly rapid. Within 50 years of Pachacuti's accession, the Inca controlled territory stretching from modern Ecuador in the north to modern Chile and Argentina in the south, 4,000 kilometres of the most difficult terrain on Earth, taken by a combination of military force and the offer of incorporation that the Inca call yanantin, mutual obligation. The Inca approach to conquest is not purely military. They prefer negotiation, offering the local elite continued status and privilege within the imperial system in exchange for acknowledgement of Inca sovereignty and participation in their mitia, the tribute system. Many peoples join the empire without significant military resistance. Others resist and are defeated, and their leaders are taken to Cusco and held as honoured guests hostages, while their children are educated in the Inca system and returned home as administrators loyal to the empire. Cusi's people are one of the groups that resist and then are incorporated. He is from a coastal people of the northern frontier, the sort of culture that has its own rich traditions and its own political structures, and its own gods and its own agricultural systems, all of which are partially preserved and partially absorbed into the Inca framework in the decades after conquest. He is a young man when the Inca army first appears in his valley, and the process of incorporation that follows, the taking of hostages, the installation of Inca administrators, the registration of his community in the Quipu system, the requirement to provide labour for the mitar, is something he experiences as a gradual and not entirely unwelcome transformation, rather than a sudden catastrophe. The Inca build a road through his valley. They build a storehouse. They give his community access to the imperial distribution system that provides food in bad years. The price is service, but the service comes with security. Cusco in the 15th century is a city unlike any other in the Americas. At its heart is the Huacay Pata, the great plaza of weeping, where the major ceremonies of the Inca year take place, and beside it the Okipata, the plaza of the warriors. The plazas are enormous by the standards of any Andean city, capable of holding tens of thousands of people for the great festivals. Around them the buildings of the Inca elite, the palaces of the living emperor and the preserved bodies of his predecessors, the great temple of the sun, the houses of the chosen women, are built in the distinctive Inca style, trapezoidal doorways and windows, walls that slope slightly inward as they rise, the surfaces of the finest buildings covered in sheets of beaten gold that catch the Andean sun. The Coricanchi, the Golden Enclosure, the great temple of Inti the sun god, is the most sacred building in the Inca world and one of the most extraordinary buildings in the Americas. Its walls are faced with gold plates. Its garden contains life-size sculptures of maize plants, llamas, and human figures, all made of gold and silver. The mummies of the previous Sapa Incas, the emperors, are kept here, seated on golden thrones, tended by their retainers, brought out for festivals to participate in the life of the living court. The Inca concept of death is not a final separation, but continuation. The dead emperor's estate continues to be managed after his death by his descendants, the Panica, who maintain his mummy, speak on his behalf, and manage his wealth. This means that each new emperor must create new wealth from new conquests, since his predecessor's estate is locked in the hands of the Panica, one of the structural pressures toward expansion that is built into the Inca political system. The Sapa Inca, the unique Inca, the emperor, is a figure of absolute sacred authority. He is the son of Inti the sun god, divine in his own right, his person so sacred that the earth he walks on must be swept before him, and his food and drink consumed by people who have never eaten from the same implements as anyone else. When he appears in public, he is carried on a golden litter, shaded by a feather canopy, surrounded by his retinue of nobles and soldiers. He does not look directly at most people. A screen of fine cloth is often held before him to protect ordinary mortals from the direct gaze of the divine. His clothing is made from the finest fabrics in the world, the compi cloth woven from the neck wool of the vicuña, the rarest and softest fibre in the Americas, and it is worn only once, then ceremonially burned, because the clothing of the Sapa Inca cannot be used by anyone else. Tupac the quipucamayoc works in the administrative complex that manages the records for several villages in the Cusco Valley region. He's not a member of the Inca elite by birth. He's a Yanacuna, a person of the retainer class who serves the state directly rather than through the ayllu system. But his skill with the quipu has earned him a position of genuine responsibility. He manages the records of the Mita labour contributions, the storage of goods in the Colca storehouses, the population counts, the agricultural yields, the movement of goods along the road system. None of this is written. It is all encoded in the quipu, the knotted strings of cotton and wool whose colour and position and type of knot encode numerical and possibly narrative information. He reads these as fluently as a scholar reads a manuscript, the information in his fingers as much as in his eyes. The quipu is one of the most extraordinary information storage systems ever devised, and it is one of the great mysteries of the ancient world, not because we do not know what it is, but because we only partially understand how it works. A quipu consists of a primary cord from which subsidiary cords hang, each subsidiary cord itself potentially having further subsidiary cords attached. The cords are made of cotton or camelid fibre in various colours. Knots tied at various positions on the cords encode numbers in a decimal positional system. The colour of the cord, its position, the type of knot, the direction of the twist, all of these appear to carry meaning, but the full system of meaning has not been recovered because the Spanish colonial authorities, alarmed by the possibility that the quipus encoded religious information, ordered many of them burned. What we know the quipu encodes is numerical information of extraordinary precision, census data, tribute records, storage inventories, military tallies, astronomical observations. The administrative efficiency of the Inca Empire, its ability to know how many people live in each province, how much food is stored in each Colca storehouse, how many soldiers can be mobilized from each region, how many llamas are in each herd, depends entirely on the Quipu system and the quipucamayoc who maintain it. Some researchers believe the quipu also encodes narrative information, that there are story quipus as well as a counting quipus. but this has not been definitively demonstrated. The question remains open, one of the tantalizing uncertainties of a civilization that was interrupted before its information systems could be fully decoded. The Inca road system, the Capacnan, the Royal Road, is one of the great engineering achievements of the pre-industrial world. At its greatest extent, it covers more than 40,000 kilometres, running the length of the Andes and connecting the empire's major centres with a network of roads, bridges, tunnels, and stairways that crosses terrain that defeated every subsequent attempt at road building until the 20th century. The roads are typically between 3 and 16 metres wide, surfaced with stone in the highland sections, and maintained by the local communities through whose territory they pass as part of their mita obligation. At regular intervals, approximately a day's walk apart, there are tambos, rest stations that provide food and accommodation for official travellers and soldiers on the move. The chasqui, the relay runners who carry messages along the Inca road system, are among the most remarkable figures in the empire. Young men trained from childhood for speed and endurance, stationed at posts a few kilometres apart, they can carry a message the entire length of the empire, from Cusco to Quito, 2,000 kilometres of mountain road, in approximately 5 days. They run in relays, each man carrying the message to the next post where a fresh runner takes it on. They also carry fresh fish from the Pacific coast to Cusco. The Sapa Inca is said to have had fresh seafood at his table, a luxury that requires runners covering the 400 kilometres of mountain road in less than 2 days, a feat that would be remarkable even with modern running shoes on a flat surface. The suspension bridges that carry the Inca roads across the deep gorges of the Andes are another extraordinary engineering achievement. Made entirely from twisted plant fibres, the ayllu grass of the highlands, woven into cables that can be more than 60 metres long and as thick as a human torso, these bridges can carry the weight of significant traffic, including loaded llamas. They require rebuilding every few years as the fibres weaken, and this rebuilding is itself a mita obligation of the communities near each bridge. The last surviving Inca suspension bridge, the Quipucamayoc Bridge over the Apurimac River, is still rebuilt annually by the local communities using traditional techniques, the living memory of the engineering knowledge that created it preserved in the practice of the people who maintain it. Tupac's daily work involves the coordination of information flowing through the road system. The chasqui bring him quipus from the outstations, updated counts, records of goods moving along the roads, reports of weather damage to bridges or storage facilities, and he incorporates this information into the master records he maintains for his district. He's good at this work in the way that people who have found their vocation are good at things, not just technically competent, but genuinely engaged, finding in the complexity of the information a kind of beauty that others do not perceive. He knows, reading a quipu, what a bookkeeper knows reading a ledger, not just the numbers, but the story the numbers tell, the patterns that indicate problems before they become crises, the trends that suggest where attention is needed. The mita is the labour tax that is the economic foundation of the Inca Empire, and understanding it requires letting go of the European categories of taxation and slavery, and thinking about something that is genuinely different from both. In the Inca system, the land belongs to 3 entities: the Sapa Inca, the sun god Inti, and the people. Each community works all 3 portions. The Inca's portion and Inti's portion produce the goods that the state stores and redistributes. The people's portion produces what the community itself consumes. The mita is not a tax on what you produce. It is a tax on your time, your labour. You owe the state a certain number of days of work per year, and in exchange the state provides you with the tools and the food and the coca leaves. You need to do that work, and in times of hardship redistributes the stored surplus to communities that need it. The ayllu is the social unit within which this system operates. An ayllu is an extended family group, sometimes hundreds of people, who share a common ancestor, real or mythological, who work together on the common lands, who share obligations and resources, who are collectively responsible for their mitta duties to the state. The ayllu is also the unit of social identity. Your ayllu is who you are in a way that is more fundamental than your individual identity, the group within which marriage happens, within which disputes are resolved, within which the obligations of daily life are distributed and managed. The Inca state governs through the ayllu structure rather than around it. The curaca, the local leader who manages the relationship between the ayllu and the state, is the crucial intermediary figure whose cooperation makes the whole system work. Koya's days are shaped by the rhythm of the agricultural year and the demands of the Mite. She's part of an ayllu of perhaps 200 people in a valley below Cusco, and their Mita obligations this season require a portion of the men to work on the construction of a new road section, and a portion of the women to work in the Aslaoasi, the house of the chosen women, producing the fine, compi cloth that the state distributes as prestige goods. She is a skilled weaver, and the work in the Aslaoasi is neither pleasant nor unpleasant. It is simply work. The same work she does at home, but organised communally and producing for the state rather than for her family. The meals provided are adequate. The coca leaves, which suppress hunger and altitude sickness and provide a mild stimulation, are distributed generously. She is home by evening. The Akela, the chosen women, are one of the most discussed and most misunderstood aspects of the Inca system. They are girls selected from communities throughout the empire for their beauty and their skill, brought to the Aslaoasi in Cusco and other major centres, and they're trained in weaving, brewing chicha, cooking, and religious service. Some become mamacuna, sacred women who serve the Sun Temple and never marry. Some are given by the Sapa Inca as wives to nobles and allies, a form of political gift that strengthens alliances. Some serve in the imperial household. The system has obvious aspects of exploitation. Girls are taken from their families without their consent, but it also provides routes to status and security that would not otherwise be available to women from ordinary aylus, and the products of the Aklahuasi, the finest textiles and the best chicha, are among the most valued goods in the empire. The Inca religious world is centered on the sun, Inti, but it is far more complex and more animist than this simple statement suggests. The Andean world is permeated by huacas, sacred places, objects and beings, whose spiritual power must be acknowledged and maintained through offerings and ceremony. A mountain peak is a huaca, a spring is a huaca, a particularly shaped stone is a huaca. The mummies of the ancestors are huacas, the Seki system, the network of sacred lines radiating from the Coricancha in all directions across the Cusco Valley, each line connecting a series of huacas that are the responsibility of a specific group to maintain, organises this sacred geography into an administrative system that is simultaneously a religious calendar, a water management framework and a record of social obligations. The Inca calendar is organised around two overlapping cycles, a solar year of 365 days and a lunar year of 12 months, and the relationship between the two is managed through a series of adjustments that require constant astronomical observation. The Inca astronomers, the Amautas, observe the solstices and equinoxes from the Intihuatana, the hitching post of the sun, a carved stone pillar found at major Inca sites whose shadows mark the key moments of the solar year. The great festivals of the Inca year are timed to these astronomical events. The Inti Raymi at the winter solstice, when the sun must be called back from its southward journey. The Capac Raymi at the summer solstice, when the initiation of young nobles takes place. The Situa festival of purification in August. The Inti Raymi, the festival of the sun, is the most important ceremony of the Inca year, and in Cusco it is an event of staggering scale and elaboration. the mummies of the previous Sapa Incas are brought out from the Coricancha and placed in the great plaza, seated on their golden thrones, present at the festival as they were present in life. The living emperor conducts the ritual of calling the sun back from its journey south, pouring chicha into a golden vessel that channels the liquid into the earth. The priests sacrifice llamas and examine their entrails for omens. The population of Cusco and the surrounding valley, tens of thousands of people, participates in the ceremony with the total commitment of a culture in which the religious and the civic and the political are inseparable aspects of a single coherent world. Koya attends the Inti Raymi with her ayllu, walking the road into Cusco in the days before the festival. The city during the great festivals is overwhelming. The population swelled by pilgrims from across the empire, the plaza full of people in the ceremonial dress of their different regions, the smell of roasting meat, and the fermented sweetness of chicha, the sound of drums and flutes and the particular shell trumpets, the pututu, whose deep resonant sound carries across the valley. She has attended this festival every year of her adult life, and it has not become ordinary. The moment when the Sapa Inca appears on his golden litter, the crowd silent, the light of the high Andean sun striking the gold of his regalia, the divine son of the sun made visible, produces in her something that she cannot name, but that is real, and that connects her to everyone around her and to everything that has come before. The capacocha, the child sacrifice that the Inca perform at moments of great importance, is one of the most disturbing aspects of Inca religion to modern observers, and it is important to understand it in its own terms before judging it by ours. The children selected for capacocha are chosen for their physical perfection, treated with great honour and ceremony, fed the best food and dressed in the finest clothes, carried to the highest mountain peaks in the empire. Some of the summits selected are over 6,000 metres above sea level, and there put to sleep, often with chicha or coca, and left to die peacefully in the cold. They are understood to become divine beings, intermediaries between the human world and the world of the mountain gods, their bodies preserved by the cold and dry air of the high peaks for centuries. The mummies discovered on Andean peaks in recent decades, the famous Ice Maiden of Ampato, the children of Lulelako, are extraordinarily preserved, their expressions peaceful, their clothing intact, the offerings buried with them still in place. The Inca army is a remarkable institution that combines the Mitar labour principle with military organisation in ways that produce a force of considerable effectiveness over the Andean terrain. Cusi serves in a unit composed primarily of men from his home region, maintaining their distinct identity and their distinct weapons. The coastal peoples fight differently from the highland peoples, with different weapons and different tactics, and the Inca army deliberately preserves these regional specializations rather than homogenizing them into a single style. His unit's particular skill is with the sling, the huaraca, a weapon that in expert hands can project a stone with enough force and accuracy to be genuinely lethal at significant range, and that the Inca army uses in massed volleys with devastating effect. The Inca army is not a professional standing force in the way that the Roman legions or the Ottoman janissaries are professional forces. It is a Mitar army, men called up from their communities for a period of military service, returning home afterward, their place in the rotation taken by others. What makes it effective is not professional training, but the organisational genius of the Inca system. The road network that allows rapid movement of large forces across difficult terrain. The storehouse system that means the army does not need to live off the land, and can therefore move through Allied territory without creating resentment. The decimal organisation of units that allows command and communication, and the Empire's practice of including the military forces of newly conquered peoples in subsequent campaigns, building an army that grows with the Empire. The Inca approach to expansion always begins with diplomacy. Before the army moves, ambassadors are sent to the target region bearing gifts, fine textiles, dried foods from the storehouses, coca leaves, and making the offer of incorporation. Join the empire, acknowledge the Sapa Inca as the son of the sun, provide your Mita labour, and you will receive the benefits of the imperial system, the roads, the storehouses, the redistribution network, the protection of the army. Many peoples accept this offer. Those who do not find the army arriving and the terms offered after military defeat are typically harsher than those offered before, though the fundamental structure of the relationship, incorporation into the Mita system, continuation of local culture within the imperial framework, remains the same. Cusi has participated in 3 campaigns by the time our story finds him. He has fought in the difficult terrain of the jungle frontier in the east, where the Inca army's advantages are diminished by the vegetation and the heat, and the peoples who resist with the tenacity that the highland tactics do not easily overcome. He has marched along the royal road for weeks at a time, the road rising and falling over passes that take your breath away, and then descending into valleys where the air is thick and warm. He has stood in the line formation before an enemy that outnumbered his unit, and felt the particular stillness that precedes violence, and the particular disorientation that follows it. He has also seen the aftermath of successful incorporation, the roads built through new territories, the storehouses filled with local surpluses, the local Karaka who was an enemy yesterday become an ally of the empire today. And he finds in this transformation something that he tentatively thinks of as worthwhile. Machu Picchu is the most famous Inca site in the world, and it is also one of the most mysterious. Perched on a ridge between 2 mountain peaks at about 2,400 meters above sea level in the cloud forest of the eastern Andes, below the Altiplano, above the Amazon basin, in the zone where the 2 worlds meet, and the vegetation is perpetually shrouded in mist. It was built in the mid-15th century, probably as a royal estate of Pachacuti, the emperor who transformed the Inca from a regional power into an empire. It was never discovered by the Spanish. It sits in a location so remote that the colonial administration apparently never knew of its existence, and it was not brought to international attention until Hiram Bingham's expedition of 1911, though local people had always known it was there. The purpose of Machu Picchu is not entirely certain, which is part of what makes it so fascinating. The most widely accepted interpretation is that it was a royal retreat, a place where the Sapa Inca and his court could spend time away from Cusco, surrounded by the extraordinary landscape of the cloud forest, performing the agricultural and religious ceremonies that were part of the emperor's sacred role. The site contains temples, residences, agricultural terraces, astronomical observation points, and a sophisticated water supply system that channels spring water through stone channels to fountains throughout the complex. The Intihuatana stone, the hitching post of the sun, is one of the best preserved in the Inca world, the Spanish having destroyed most of them elsewhere. The construction of Machu Picchu is itself a testimony to the organisational power of the Inca system. The stone for the buildings comes from quarries within the site. The geological survey of the ridge was clearly part of the planning process, and is shaped with stone and bronze tools to fit together without mortar with extraordinary precision. The terraces that cascade down the steep slopes are not just agricultural but structural. They prevent erosion and manage water in a landscape that receives several meters of rain per year. The drainage systems are so well designed that the site has remained stable through 5 centuries of earthquakes and landslides that have destroyed much else in the region. The engineers who designed Machu Picchu understood the landscape they were building in at a level of sophistication that is genuinely impressive. The people who lived and worked at Machu Picchu were primarily Yanakuna, the retainer class who served the royal household directly, and Akala, the chosen women whose weaving and brewing served the imperial ceremonial needs. There were perhaps 700 to 1,200 people at the site at any one time, a small community by the standards of the empire, but one whose daily life was shaped by the extraordinary landscape around it. They would have woken to the cloud forest mist, worked through days when the mist cleared to reveal the mountains above and the valley below, and slept to the sound of the Urubamba River 200 meters below the site, its sound carried up by the acoustics of the canyon. The Inca Empire is at the height of its power when Francisco Pizarro and his force of approximately 168 men enter its territory in 1532. It is also in the middle of a catastrophic civil war. The Sapa Inca Huayna Capac has died in 1527, probably of smallpox, the epidemic that is racing ahead of the Spanish even before the Spanish arrive in person, killing perhaps a third of the Andean population, including the emperor and his designated heir. The two surviving sons, Huascar and Atahualpa, fight a civil war for the succession that Atahualpa is winning when Pizarro arrives. The empire is militarily divided, demographically devastated by disease, and politically uncertain in a way it has not been for a century. The encounter at Cajamarca on November 16th, 1532 is one of the most consequential meetings in the history of the world. Atahualpa, who has recently won the civil war and controls the most powerful army in South America, agrees to meet Pizarro in the plaza of Cajamarca. He arrives in a procession of extraordinary magnificence, carried on his golden litter, surrounded by thousands of retainers in their finest dress, the display of imperial power at its most complete. What follows is a surprise attack by the Spanish, who have hidden their cavalry and their cannon in the buildings around the plaza. The cannon fires, the cavalry charges, the Inca retainers, who have never seen horses or guns and who are forbidden by religious and social convention from defending the sacred person of the Sapa Inca, are massacred. Atahualpa is captured. In the chaos of that afternoon, without a single Spanish death, the most powerful empire in the Americas has effectively ended. The ransom of Atahualpa is the most famous transaction in the history of the Americas. Atahualpa, understanding that the Spanish want gold and silver, offers to fill the room in which he is held, approximately 57 square meters, with gold to the height of a man's reach, and to fill 2 smaller rooms with silver. The offer is accepted. Over the following months, gold and silver objects from throughout the empire, sacred vessels from the Coricancha, ornaments from the royal palaces, jewellery from the nobility, are melted down and transported to Cajamarca. The total is somewhere between 6,000 and 11,000 kilograms of gold and 12,000 kilograms of silver. Pizarro takes the ransom and executes Atahualpa anyway, baptizing him before the execution so that he can be strangled rather than burned. Burning would destroy the body and prevent the mummification that Andean tradition requires, which Pizarro apparently understands and uses as a form of additional torture. The Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire takes another 40 years to complete. Inca resistance, led by a series of leaders from the royal family in the fortress of Vilcabamba in the Cloud Forest, continues until 1572, when the last Inca, Tupac Amaru, is captured and executed in Cusco's main plaza, before a crowd that includes Spanish officials and Inca nobles. But the functional end of the empire comes quickly after Cajamarca. The administrative system that depends on the Quipu and the ermita and the storehouse network loses its coherence as the Spanish install their own administrative structures. The road system falls into disrepair. The storehouses are emptied. The population continues to collapse from disease. By the end of the 16th century, the population of the Andes has fallen from perhaps 12 million to perhaps 1 million. The greatest demographic catastrophe in the history of the hemisphere. The Inca Empire ends in the 16th century, but the Andean world it shaped does not end. The Quechua language, the lingua franca of the empire, imposed on all conquered peoples as the language of administration, and increasingly adopted as a native tongue. survives today as the most widely spoken indigenous language in the Americas, with perhaps 8 to 10 million speakers across Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, Colombia, and Argentina. The agricultural innovations of the Inca and their Andean predecessors, the terracing, the raised fields, the sophisticated water management, the development of hundreds of varieties of potato and maize and quinoa adapted to different altitudes and climates, are among the most significant contributions to world agriculture in human history. The potato, which is native to the Andes and was domesticated there thousands of years before the Inca, is the Andean contribution to world food that has had the greatest global impact. Introduced to Europe by the Spanish in the 16th century, it becomes by the 18th and 19th centuries one of the most important food crops in the world, the staple that allows the population of northern Europe to grow dramatically, that sustains the Irish population at its peak before the famine, that feeds the industrialising cities of England and Germany. The potato famine of the 1840s, which kills 1 million people in Ireland and drives another million to emigrate, is the consequence of a century of dependence on a single Andean crop variety. The terrible irony of a civilization's gift turned into its own people's vulnerability. Machu Picchu is the most visible physical legacy of the Inca, and it is extraordinary that it survives as well as it does. The Spanish never found it. It was not quarried for building materials as most Inca sites were, and the cloud forest that surrounds it preserved it from the deterioration that exposure to sun and wind would have caused. The Capac Nan, the Royal Road System, is recognised by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site. The surviving sections a monument to the engineering genius that crossed the Andes without the wheel. The Quipucamayoc Bridge is rebuilt every year. The terraces of the Colca Canyon and the Sacred Valley are still in agricultural use, the Inca engineering still producing food after 5 centuries. The indigenous peoples of the Andes carry the Inca heritage in their daily lives in ways that are too numerous to catalogue completely. The weaving traditions, the bright geometric patterns of the highland textiles, are direct descendants of the Inca and pre-Inca traditions. The agricultural calendar is still organised around the Andean seasons. The festival of Inti Raymi is still celebrated in Cusco every June solstice, the ceremony reconstructed from the colonial accounts and performed for thousands of visitors from around the world. The concept of ayllu, reciprocal obligation, the fundamental Andean social principle that underlies the mita and the ayllu system, persists in Andean communities as a living practice, the work done for your neighbour today that you can call on when you need it tomorrow. What the Inca demonstrated, in their century of imperial power, is that civilization does not require the wheel or iron or writing in the forms that the Old World developed them. They solved the problems of large-scale administration, agricultural organisation, architectural engineering and social cohesion with the materials and the concepts available to them in the Andes, and the solutions they found, the quipu, the road, the storehouse, the mita, the seke system, were genuinely elegant answers to genuinely difficult problems. The empire they built was not perfect. No empire is. But it was, in its best expression, a sophisticated and in many ways humane attempt to organise the diverse peoples of the Andes into a coherent whole. That this attempt was destroyed by disease and conquest before it could be fully understood is one of the great losses of the early modern world. It is evening in the Cusco Valley. Koya has finished the day's work and is walking home from the Akalawasi along the road that runs through her valley. The road she has walked hundreds of times, its stone surface familiar under her feet. The sun is behind the mountains to the west, and the light on the peaks to the east is going from gold to rose to the deep cold blue that precedes darkness. The air at this altitude is thin and sharp and smells of the grass of the puna and the cook fires of the village below. She can hear very faintly someone playing a quena flute in the village, the high, pure sound of the bone flute that carries further than you expect in the thin air. Tupac is at his Quipu table in the administrative centre as the light fails, finishing the records for the day. He works until he can no longer see the knots clearly, then rolls the quipus carefully and stores them in their designated order.
The information they contain, the labor counts, the storage tallies, the population records, is the empire in its most essential form. Not the gold of the Coricancha or the stone of the temples, but the knowledge of what is where and who owes what to whom. He does not think of this as humble work. He thinks of it as the work that makes everything else possible. QC is in a tambo on the road, resting between marches. The tambo is built in the Inca style, the trapezoidal doorway, the stone walls that need no mortar, and it provides a roof and a meal and a place to sleep that is better than anything he would have had on the road before the empire built it here. He lies on his back and listens to the sounds of the Andes at night, the wind in the itcha grass, the distant sound of water in a stream somewhere below, the breathing of the other soldiers around him. The stars at altitude are extraordinary. So many of them, so bright, the Milky Way a river of light across the sky. The Inca see the dark spaces between the stars, not the stars themselves, as the constellations, the dark cloud llama, the dark cloud fox, the dark cloud toad. He has learned their names. He looks for them now, finding them in the dark patches of the sky, the animals of the Andean world made permanent in the heavens. The quena flute plays on in the valley below, the sound rising on the cold air. The stars appear one by one above the mountains. The road runs north and south through the darkness, the empire's spine. The llamas in the pen outside the tambo shift and settle. Koya reaches her village and the sound of her family. Tupac puts away his quipus and wraps himself in his cloak. QC closes his eyes, the dark cloud llama still visible behind his eyelids. The stars of the Andes watching over the world they have watched over for longer than any empire. This has been Midnight Chronicle. Sleep well, wherever in the world you are tonight.